Earlier in this biology course, we learned that life is set up in a giant hierarchy with life at the top, three domains, trickling all the way down to organisms and even the genes underneath the organisms. Today, I'd like to hear about how life is built hierarchy from the bolts and nuts upwards. Of course, life doesn't really have bolts and nuts. It's built from atoms and chemicals and molecules. But this is the hierarchy I'm talking about. I'm talking about how life is built. And as we discussed earlier, this type of a hierarchy of the building of life is orthogonal to how life is organized among groups. And so we can really talk about both, just like you can have an X position and a Y position, and that helps you localize where you are. So let's look at the different hierarchies of life. The very bottom level, we have these things called molecular machines. Now, earlier I said life was built from molecules and chemicals. Yes, that's true, but if you found a chemical out there on the sidewalk, you wouldn't know that it came from life because chemicals can come from outer space and from all different places. If you found a molecular machine, you would know that that is from life because that only occurs in life. Molecular machines are about 1 nanometer wide, tall, and long, sometimes 2. So that's 10 to the minus 9th meters. That's the lowest level of this hierarchy. Above that, you have molecular assembly lines. That's about 10 to the minus 8th meter, and that's an assembly of these molecular machines. Just like a real assembly line in a car factory is a bunch of tools put together. So also a molecular assembly line is a bunch of molecular machines put together in a line. Above that level, at about 10 to the minus 7 meters, are lipid enclosed organelles, vesicles, little packages of things that are enclosed by this lipid membrane. And above that level are the cells themselves, which range in size from 10 to the minus 6 meters or 1 micrometer to 10 micrometers or even larger. Cells then can organize themselves into tissues. Tissues can organize themselves into organs like hearts and lungs. And then the organs come together into organisms themselves. Now, you'll notice that organisms in this hierarchy is one of the categories, as it was in the last hierarchy. So there are some things that are the same, and yet they're still orthogonal. Just like the X scale and the Y scale both can have zeros in them, or ones, but they're not parallel, they're perpendicular, and they can give you information about how you're doing something, just like these two hierarchies can give you information about how you're studying biology, how you're learning biology. Above the level of organisms, where do we go? What do we build up from there? Well, you can build communities and ecosystems and what are called biomes, and all the way up to the full planetary ecosystem, which is called the biosphere, which is about 10 to the 7th meters wide. So we went from 10 to the minus 9 all the way up to 10 to the 7th. Horizontal and vertical interactions in this hierarchy are very essential. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you have a molecular machine at the bottom, it interacts with other molecular machines horizontally. So it passes things off to other machines, but it also operates vertically to the molecular assembly lines, interacting with that, and even skips a level and interacts directly with the organelles in the cell. So you have these horizontal and vertical interactions. One thing to note is that these levels are roughly size-based. So as I said, things that are small at the bottom and big at the top. Now, last time we looked at a cube, we only really had one face of the cube, the face of the Linnaean hierarchy of life. Now we have two faces, this face, which is how life is built, and the Linnaean hierarchy. So how do they interact? Well, first let's understand these concepts a little bit more. Last time I said that the left face shows in most diagrams the 6 kingdoms. So those are things like plant kingdom, animal kingdom, fungi kingdom. But as I said earlier, these plant kingdoms, those lines across the levels on that face can be further divided. So all the animals can be divided into the phyla of animals, the order of those phyla, etc. If you took fruit flies, for example, as one particular organism, it would be a very thin slice of the category of animals in the six kingdoms. And it would fit in the larger category of the domain of eukaryota. So that would be where fruit flies are on the left face of that cube. Now, the right face is what we're talking about today, the building hierarchy. And you could find molecular machines in the thin slice of how the molecules of life fit together. And a molecule called kinesin, which is a walking molecular machine, would be a very thin slice of the molecular machines. Okay? And then the top face of this cube is the face that shows all the organizational principles. And most textbooks actually organize their chapters based on those principles. There might be 6 or 5. I helped with a textbook that's completely online called BioBook, and it has 6 organizational principles, and it organizes those 6 roots into branches, and then branches into leaves. So that's a hierarchical organization of the top face of Uno's cube. So, for example, one of the organizational principles of the top face is how thermodynamics and chemistry fit into biology. So that would be a thin slice of the top cube. So putting those 3 different faces together, for example, you could get the X, the Y, and the Z to localize exactly what you're studying in biology. So I'm a researcher in biology, and for a period of time, I studied kinesin, fruit flies, and their thermodynamics. So that would be the X, the Y, and the Z of that cube. It really shows you exactly what I was studying in biology. And not only for people who are doing research, but for you, if you're learning biology, this cube can help you understand how the different parts of what you're learning fit together. So if you're learning about kinesin fruit fly and their physiochemical processes, you would be studying exactly the same region that I was doing the research on. And this can help you understand, well, what part of biology am I really learning? I would think that at this point, you've got a lot to learn about. So the best is just to study that cube and look at the different names on that cube and think about what an XYZ interaction of those 3 faces might look like. And you will already start gaining some understanding of biology.